Hello.
Hi, Hamid. How are you?
Thank you. How are you, my friend?
Fantastic. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. Thank you so much for joining to this live interview. We're super excited to have you in this talk. I, I, I'm giving you the microphone if you want to say hello to our audience.
Well, hi everyone, and thank you, Hamid, for having us here on your talk. And of course, it's a great honor, and look forward to a very interesting conversation.
Thank
So,
you so much.
so lovely to be here. Thank you.
Appreciate that. So let's just start with your steps getting into the architecture. First of all, you can introduce yourself. After I gave an introduction about you, definitely you need no introduction again. So briefly, can you introduce yourself and how did you start your architecture career?
So, I just want to go back a little, and a lot of people ask me, how did you get into architecture? And did you have someone in your family who was an architect or a designer? And it was just very, very strange because ever since I was about 12 or 13, I was in high school, I decided I wanted to be an architect. Of course, my parents thought it's going to be a passing, it'll be a phase that you'll probably go through. There was this sort of hypnotic draw, and I felt a sense of resurrection once I got into undergrad studies and then went on for my masters. It's just been I just sometimes I define architecture as a very expensive hobby. And yeah, and it just we love what we do, and I just love getting into office every single day and just ideating with the team and working on a bunch of concepts and ideas. So for me, it's leisure. It's pure luxury, and I mean, there hasn't been a day when I haven't gotten when I had to drag myself going to office. Touch wood. So I'm just very, very blessed to have found this profession that I sort of love so dearly.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So what happened? You started your own practice, Nudes.
So yeah, Nudes was actually you know once I came back from London, and we started working on a bunch of design competitions, and we won a few. And of course, the origin of the brand name is a story by itself. So a lot of people say nudes, and of course, we were trying to throw in words into this brand maker. So I threw in Nuru Karim, innovation design, and it spits out a number of words from 3 letters to 10 letters or 15 letters. Well, not 15 letters, but 9, 10 letter words, long words, short words. And then this name popped out, which was Nudes, and I was very shy. So I said, maybe I'll put a full stop. I'll say nu.te. So it's more like, nu design. And then it just sort of grew on us. It grew as a brand name, and we've always had a wonderful conversation. Once we hand a card to a client or a friend or a potential collaborator, they're very sort of interested by this name, so that becomes a story by itself here.
Yeah, nice. And you mentioned you work with Zaha Hadid Architects. Was it in a period you worked with Zaha herself or with the office?
So I was there for a very, very short period.
Okay. In the office.
In the office, very, very short period. And for very tragic circumstances, I had to leave and then come back. But I worked under Patrick Schumacher, and he's a great guy. And he was also teaching us at the Architectural Association. So we had a great time with Patrick, and we had a great team. I remember there was Mark Font on the team, Alvin was there, a bunch of great guys that it was very exciting working in that studio. The energy levels were high. It was very exciting. Yeah.
Inspiring generation. Yes. And Nuru, you're one of the first, let's say, one of the first architects who are trying to bring some kind of integration of technology with architecture and also construction. In your recent works that we have seen, many of them we have shared on our platform, and all over the social media we can find. Where was that kind of love to, let's say, need to these design tools and technologies brought them on the spot that you saw a need that we need to use these tools and technologies in projects, and you started implementing them? And what happened? You got into the new design tools.
So, I don't remember who actually said it, but there was, someone who mentioned that architecture is in its Walkman phase, right? So while all the other industries are making leaps and bounds, it's like today you're walking on the street and you see someone on the road with a Walkman, you say, oh my God, which age is this person from? And
Yes,
I would
true.
take that one step further, and I would say, architecture is probably in its pager era. Remember when we were kids growing up, we had a pager, and then someone would page us, and we would call back and stuff like that. And it is true. One of my recent TEDx talks was about that how resourceful, how capitally, how rich the construction industry is, right? But if you actually see the sort of research and development sort of investment that's coming in from the construction industry, which is a very capital intensive industry, you really don't find that sort of research and innovation or research and development in the construction industry per se, right? And one of the cornerstones is technology. We're looking at interesting phase in our lives with 3D printing and 4D printing. And never has there been this sort of technology that's becoming so affordable, but it's also sort of scaling up. So it's getting more ambitious from a small, desktop, like a small bottle that you could print, to larger houses that you could actually construct. So we are actually at a very, very interesting moment where architectural development is concerned. We've seen this amazing sort of bridge being printed by
George
Block
Lerman, yeah,
and
Block Research Group, yeah.
Studio, and some amazing 3D printed bridges also in Netherlands, and some 3D printed houses made out of earth and clay. So that becomes very, very exciting moment, and I think that it has to be sort of driven, taken forward. It will get more affordable. And when I mean affordable, is that it's very important that we also design for the other 99%, right? We're not only focusing on the rich and elite. And I think that's the big challenge when this technology becomes affordable to a critical mass.
Yes.
And that becomes very, very, very important.
Yes. I was going to ask my question related to 3D printing at nearly end, but you opened up the discussion. Let's just talk about that. Are you doing any research projects or any prototyping, like housing, or any, even in smaller scales, related to 3D printing?
We are working on it. We are actually at a very nascent stage, and we try to put together a collaborative paper, including a bunch of stakeholders, but we want to actually present it, as a research paper and get some sort of grant funding for that. So if you know anyone, let us know.
I'll introduce. Yeah, that's nice because these technologies are really getting involved into the design, and also you need to know how to design according to be 3D printable projects, and pioneers like yourself are really pushing the boundaries to bring these tools to architecture and also construction as well. And we really highly appreciate them, and we do also research on the projects that are being done, try to chase to publish them as well. But how do you think how far we are in terms of having 3D printed houses or having a 3D printing architecture coming to life as a normal building, like, because these days are kind of some prototypes are being done, some small examples, let's say even large examples, but it's not quite there yet, and we have quite some period, let's say a decade or 2 decades to reach to that point. How far do you think we are to be in that place, to see a 3D printed project as a normal project?
So I think in terms of scale, we've already sort of achieved, like a ground story structure, right? But I believe there are some housing projects which are, even ground plus 2 and all of that. So, but, so I'm not sure whether, you're looking at high-rise construction and stuff like that. So if you look at that.
No, that's not definitely, we're not going to be,
Yeah. So but it's happening. I think we're very, very close to what's happening, and I always get that sort of when we discuss this with the stakeholders and clients. And the reason I brought it up was because they're very concerned about as you move up vertically, and perhaps you don't have to move up vertically. Maybe you need to stick to the ground and create this very sustainable form of construction, which really is a technology that uses zero waste, right? So, and the great thing about this is you could be printing in earth, you could be printing in sand, you could be printing in concrete, you could be printing in biodegradable waste. The sort of the material logic and the sort of R&D where materiality is concerned opens the doors, for the construction industry. But for a very long time, we've been working with these 2 or 3 sort of materials like the bricks and concrete and stone and all of that. And a lot of these are not renewable sources of energy, right? The sort of impact that material like concrete could have, where climate change is concerned. So, if you can actually build with earth and it's right out there, it becomes a far more sustainable form of construction. Of course, the entire sort of apparatus that sort of used, the entire 3D printer, obviously, once you start building out a number of these numbers of these housing projects or a number of these units, then it becomes a little more cost effective, and the impact on sustainability then can be truly gauged.
Yeah, true. One of the major design methodologies that we see in your project is inspiring from nature, and also trying to apply it in a large scale. For example, in the towers that you design, you bring pots into the towers. For example, in your bookworm pavilion, you inspire from nature and you try to solve an issue with a social, let's say a social issue, you want to make a social change with inspiring from nature. How does this work for you? How do you encounter that problem or that issue, and you try to bring some changes with the given tools, with the parametric tools, let's say we have, and also inspiring from nature? How does that work for you?
So, nature is such a big reservoir, it's such a fascinating bed of ideas that it can dip into, and it's been happening for many, many centuries. There were greats like even Leonardo da Vinci, who sort of dipped into nature and was fascinated by how, things could pan out. In the recent centuries, you had great architects like Gaudi and Fry Otto and a bunch of amazing structural engineers also, very fascinated with engineering. But for the longest time, we've been looking at nature as providers, right? So if we want something, we actually go to nature and we start taking from nature. The shift is when you start looking at nature as a mentor, something that you can learn so much from, right? So that becomes very, very fascinating. And of course, obviously, when you look at parametric design tools, there's a big sort of research bed of extracting or extrapolating, data from nature, geometry in nature, fractals, phyllotaxis, all these amazing sort of tool sets that could actually pop out from understanding math and the relationship between mathematics and nature. But also in terms of performance, so it's not only about getting to a stage where you understand the geometrical construct where nature is concerned, where geometry and math is concerned, but also understanding the performance. And that becomes again a very important domain where biomimetics is concerned. For us, it becomes important because we are looking at a lot of our studios actually working with social impact in the sense that, for example, we did the Bookworm Pavilion. We wanted to instill the love for reading and look at education as empowerment. There's another school that we won a competition for where we thought maybe architecture could be a bridge between, architecture and addressing infrastructure within the city, or even purification of air. We're looking at health issues, quality of life issues, so on and so forth. So I think it becomes something more meaningful rather than saying, okay, fine, we want it to look sculptural, and it still looks beautiful, very interesting spatially as you move through. But I think the real sort of challenge is the social impact. And that sort of thing, and that's one element we've been really focusing on, and nothing has really. The recent pandemic has also thrown a lot of light on that, looking at nature as an engine for recovery. So I think these become very critical sort of layers that we are grafting onto our current research and investigation.
Yes, and also using these tools, how do you connect them with the vernacular materials? Like the projects that you do, they are mostly using, let's say, not many cheap, but you are using vernacular materials to lower the cost of the projects. How you are implementing these materials with parametric tools that you have and bring them to life?
Yeah, so when we start looking at materials, we're looking at more as performance, where the material is concerned, not in terms of that sort of superficial beauty, But for example, we did an entire project made out of cardboard, and there's of course a great legacy of cardboard, and of course the work of Shigeru Ban has been inspirational. He's worked with cardboard and he's worked with paper tubes. But it's such a fascinating material, and 50% air, acoustically very sound, recyclable, has a very low sort of carbon footprint. But I think what becomes very, very interesting is that we understand materiality as also something which is based on performance, right? And not just pure aesthetics. So whether it's earth, or it's brick, or it's sand, or it's concrete, or it's steel. I think all of them have a certain role to play in the organization of material and formal intent.
Yes. What inspires you in architecture, Nuru? Maybe you answered this question at the beginning, but in detail, what inspires you in your daily life when you design, when you look for inspiration?
I just feel very restless. I just feel like, I just feel like I just need to innovate something, or if not every day, every week, I just need a sort of. So whether just a sketch on one of these tools or softwares, or a model, or something in the studio, or even writing something down, I just feel incomplete without actually addressing that, and that's what I told my staff. I told my colleagues also. If you find me grumpy in the studio, it's because it's just that I'm trying to seek something. I'm trying to chase something, hit
Yes,
that
true.
sweet spot where innovation is concerned, or well, just stretching yourself, not get into any sort of comfort zone, but just stretch yourself and be that student of architecture, and now that's all I want to be known as a student of architecture, is probably learning every single day, if not every single hour.
Absolutely, definitely. I see myself as a student as well. That's good to know that. So, are there any architects that you admire their work, like from now or previous, live architects or
Yeah,
any other architects?
some great stuff happening. There's of course Zaha is doing some incredible work. There's UN Studio. There's big some the big guns. There's also Japanese architects who really inspire me. I'm just really fascinated by the sort of Japanese minimalism, and just the sort of connectivity with nature and materiality and wood, and that sort of silence where space is concerned. So for me, even that becomes a very, very interesting point. And I just love visiting new countries, new cities, visiting historic architecture, whether they're temples or mosques or churches or citadels, kingdoms, fortresses. I love forts. I love going to forts, and I love going to museums. I think a big part of my education has actually uh, unveiled in my visits to museums and galleries. So whether it's the
Yes.
Guggenheim or the MoMAs, or I feel very sort of connected when I see art. I feel a bit of that appetite for that hunger for that knowledge gets quenched when I visit a museum or a gallery space. So that's my first stop. That's something I must do. Whether it's a Tate Modern, I enter a new city, I must spend like 3 days or 4 days, even if it's a trip for a week. The Louvre's, Abu Dhabi. My last trip was I went specially to the Louvre to check it out, and it was beautiful. Yeah, it's very fulfilling when I'm surrounded by art and culture.
That's nice. Uh, One of the our upcoming studio and also our collaboration is the studio workshop that we're gonna have at the Academy, and it is called Parametric Design as a Catalyst for Social Innovation. And in this studio, which will start from the end of the month, we're gonna have our students, and in 6 sessions, we're gonna you will lead this studio and teach students how to use software and also integrate it with architecture, add your design taste and get inspired from nature, and create your project. Do you want to talk more about this studio workshop and give our audience what will they learn during the process? Because we have our audience, some of our students are also joining, and they are eager to know the process, to understand what will they learn, and also what will be the outcome that we will be expecting from them. And also for those ones who are interested also to join, they can check the link in our bio and read the descriptions. But in more to give more information to our audience, can you discuss in more details about this studio?
Absolutely, Hamid. So, firstly, it's wonderful collaborating, with yourself and
Thank you.
PA Academy, and it's wonderful. I think the format's very interesting, and most of the formats are based on tutorials, but the fact that we're actually looking at a studio makes it very, very exciting, which means, there's going to be a conversation going. For me, this was very critical because we wanted to simplify the process. A lot of people think that these softwares, are very intimidating. And we just wanted to simplify it and just investigate the role of design through bottom-up thinking processes. So I think that became very, very interesting for us to get into. But what will become very fascinating is, and I can't wait to see the work that's coming out of the studio as to how this work can potentially become an archive for conversations. But the role that we can have where social impact is concerned. The studio has 4 verticals. So, it really depends on the professional who's joining or our colleagues who are joining, but we're looking at harnessing solar energy. And recently we did we were happy to be part of this Burning Man project and work on the solar mountain, which is going to be constructed in Nevada, the Fly Ranch property. So that's one interesting project that we're going to look at. But just harnessing solar energy, education, water, growth. Just creating these sort of edible pavilions where you can actually grow stuff and create this sort of sustainable system where food security is concerned. But it's also going to be radical, right? So we really want to be out there in the future and test some very interesting sort of ideas and notions. But we want to keep it simple. We want to make sure that everyone is comfortable where the studio is concerned. It doesn't matter what level you want to join. You could be absolutely basic. You probably wouldn't have even heard of the software and you might want to dip into it. Or you could be an advanced professional who's trying to look at how these tools can actually push the agenda where design is concerned. And the idea is to sort of empower these colleagues and professionals to look at design thinking. It doesn't matter what tool you're using, but the focus is on design thinking and to liberate yourself. So it's going to be very, very exciting. There's a team we're working with, about 3-4 of us, and we've been having an absolute blast. We've been working extremely hard to come up with a really interesting package over the 6 weeks. And we honestly, we're more excited than we could have imagined. It's very exciting.
Thank you. Actually, I'd like to add, in case anyone is interested to have a look to the studio and the timings, please go and click on the link in our bio. So you will have the entire page about this upcoming studio with Nuru Karim. It's going to start from the end of the month. Just limited spots are left. Go and click the link, and if you're interested, register as soon as possible. We have just a couple of seats empty now. Maybe till the end of this talk, they will be filled as well. And Nuru, we were having the same discussion with Arthur Mamamani as well, and maybe he's watching right now this talk as well. And you were as a jury member, you joined as a jury member in our studio as well, and you saw in that 6th session how the students were able, with the group work, were able to generate a really inspiring project from scratch to 100%, and show their developments. How do you think? I know you are also you have your own education platform as well, and you're also teaching in universities and in schools. And how do you think these online studio workshops can help students to grasp what is going on in the world of architecture and try to apply them? Because normally before, everywhere was just about normal physical studios, and also they wouldn't believe in online educations that happen, and they can help to move this forward. But after the pandemic, everything changed, and everyone just turned on to online education systems, and we saw that effect in our studios, in our the workshops that we are bringing pioneers like yourself, like Arthur Mamamani, a lot of our pioneering architects that we bring to the Top Academy. How do you think this online education is also helping the young designers to understand what pioneering architects doing and grasp or understand their logic and just learn the way that they are doing in design? How do you think the online is helping them?
I think it's also the format. The studio format is fascinating, and I think the times period is also very interesting. The 6 week sort of workshop. And I just want to give you one example. This was when I was at the Architectural Association, and we had Hernan. I don't know if you probably, of course, you know,
yes, Sayar, yeah,
who's the dean of SIAC, and he came in for a workshop. And in that workshop, we also Shajay, of course. Shajay was my classmate, and I think we were part of that workshop at Hernan. And I will never forget that workshop. It was amazing. It was very early on. I think this was in our first couple of months at the Architectural Association. It was just for like 2 weeks. That's it. Like 2 sessions on a weekend, Friday, Saturday, and we had it was a game changer. And these sort of small workshops, design workshops, can be game changers where you actually are sort of introduced to softwares, you have some lectures, you have a discussion, you got a jury, and more importantly, there's peer-to-peer learning, right? I find, honestly, online tutorials very boring, because you're just sitting in front of a computer and you're just learning something. There's no interaction, nothing, right? And the studio formats become very exciting because forget about learning from us, you're going to be learning more from each other. And that's when the collective data comes in, presentations happen, discussions happen. It's exciting for us because even we get to learn, so it's I think these are going to be very exciting sessions. And I want to thank you, Hamid, for having the vision for bringing this to the forefront. I think it's very critical, and it's a piece that has been missing. Normally you just want to engage into a university or a college, and it takes 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. But to get
exactly.
get this shot, this design shot, this adrenaline running is very important. This quick burst. Yeah.
Exactly, because most of our students are not just students from universities; they are coming from the practice as well, like from big architectural offices, or who are in the practice for 10 years, but they need an upgrade. They need to get into the new design tools and technologies, and these knowledge packages that we provide by inviting pioneers like yourself, it's kind of an adrenaline to them to keep the process going and working as an architect in the field. Thank you so much for these information about the studio. In case anyone is interested to join the studio, last spots are left. I see people are just getting signed up. Thank you so much. Just a couple of spots left. If you're interested, just check the link in our bio. And you have the full description about the studio and the schedules starting from the end of the month. So continuing our discussion generally about architecture, what do you think how architecture can help in the post-pandemic, in the transition to the post-pandemic world? Because during the pandemic, we suffered under some circumstances that we had not unwise design conditions for residential projects, for housing projects. How do you think this pandemic was an opportunity for us to understand what we have done before, and also what is your vision for the future of how architecture can help in this transition?
So I think it's now, what it's made us understand is, of course, nature is a very important engine for recovery, right? And issues like sustainability, respecting nature, respecting habitats, respecting the ecosystems are not secondary concerns, but primary concerns. So while we attempt to develop our cities and our infrastructure, I think it's important to take a couple of steps back and sort of look at all these elements which are so important where our planet's resources are concerned. But I think, when we talk about sustainability, but now we need to start talking about circular economies, right? So we have the linear economy, which is just basically about producing something and wasting something. We've got the reuse economy and the recycle economy, which means we're producing something and recycling something. But we need to start looking at this cradle to cradle approach. How do we actually even design from waste? For that matter, or how do we actually even consider waste during our design process? All these become very, very important issues. I think where our cities are concerned, a lot of very interesting sort of urban design principles are based on these 15-minute cities. We see a lot of interesting discussions happening in Europe and Paris and in Netherlands. And honestly, being in India and being in Mumbai, I would love to see more investment in non-motorized infrastructure. So right now, yes, there's a lot of roads and highways and expressways and trains and all of that being built. But honestly, I wish we could go back 50 years and just look at non-motorized infrastructure, cycling to work, beautiful open spaces, parks, safe pedestrian walkways. And for everyone, everyone, including an infant or a mother with a pram, or even a senior citizen on a wheelchair, or just safe sort of neighborhoods. So I think I would like that to happen. And the pandemic has really exposed that sort of lack in urban sort of green infrastructure. Cleaner cities, cleaner sort of areas where we can actually just breathe and move around in a very clean environment. So I think that becomes important. I would love to see more investment in non-motorized infrastructure.
Yeah, nice. Somehow you answered my next question as well. How do you define a good architecture? Is that can be that one considered as your answer to this question as well?
Yeah, you could. It's a tough one.
But if you want to go in more in details and talk about a good architecture, because you talked about circular economy, you talked about sustainability, you talked about inspiring from nature, technology, to see the technology in our current projects, in the era that we are living, but combining all these tools, all these inspirations, everything. How do you define a good architecture? Or should we do all of them in one project?
Not really. Sometimes it's sort of governed by different forces, So, yes. But it's great. Like that's why the Bookworm Pavilion was very special for us, because it was
a good example of that.
It was structured, it was recyclability, it was aimed towards user profile for kids running around, browsing books, sitting on it. So for us, that was a sweet spot where we felt it was a simple system, and the system went all the way through. But it's a loaded question, difficult to answer. But there are several examples of great architecture that we've seen, all the greats and across centuries. So I wouldn't say there's any sort of bad architecture, let me put it that way.
No. In terms of good architecture, good and bad is something that is depending on each person's subjective. But generally, when we see like a project, or we see the users, how the users treat or act with any project or any building, we can understand that this project might be not acting as expected, or doesn't meet maybe the functions, or it meets functions, it doesn't, it has some negative social effects. But in general, all of these, when combining them together, we can somehow understand if the project is good, or maybe after 5 years or 10 years we understand this, maybe after 20 years, but at a certain spot it can define itself as a good, or let's say not bad, but as a good project. What do you think in terms of, because you're an Indian architecture, you've grown and raised with Indian architecture as well. How do you define India's architecture?
I think it's sort of promising. It's there's some good stuff happening across cities. It's definitely it's changing, and you know, the sort of post-independence era where we had Corbusier and Louis Kahn and you know, the design of Chandigarh and some great iconic buildings across Ahmedabad. And so there was a big sort of legacy, and then moved to the next generation and so on and so forth. But it is getting interesting. A lot of it is also builder driven. So there's a lot of you know, there's a great fascination with, you know, FSI, which is floor space index, or FAR, and consuming everything and making the most of something commercially. So there are lots of those sort of projects, and very often those sort of get contaminated because of these different sort of policies. Sometimes they are cost budgets, economics play a role, user dissatisfaction, so on and so forth. But it is sort of changing. I like to be very optimistic about it. But of course, there is a gap in technological infrastructure. It's happening in few spots. And we have a lot of catching up to do. With technological infrastructure. And I don't mean that in our design studios, but it also means in the quality of work, or the quality of construction that's coming out. You know.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of work to do. There is marginal improvement, but not at the pace at which should have happened. Yeah.
Yes, true. Nice. And we have a couple of questions from our audience. I'm just swiping them in. Saifik asks, how has social impact becomes a critical layer in your domain of parametricism or parametric design, let's say? And how do you quantify for social impact in your process?
So, you know, I've had a great deal of experience also working in the sectors of housing, sanitation, water, you know, for the underprivileged. And I did a lot of that work as a volunteer. So now you know how the sort of two worlds sort of meet, you know, or trying to meet, but through a very innovative lens. But I think these become very critical issues. You mentioned, you know, how do you define good architecture, perhaps through the lens of innovation? How do you define that innovation becomes again critical. So maybe one way could be by assessing it against the layer of social impact. One layer could be assessing it through another layer of sustainability or choice of material, which is respectful to the Earth's resources. The other is just through user experience, you know, or the quality of light that sort of filters in through, or through the innovative user material and construction processes, you know. But the idea is to actually start, you know, innovating and you sort of raise the benchmark slightly higher as you start to move upwards, you know, even within your sort of body of work, you start asking those difficult questions, and every project then becomes significant. Because as you know, I mean, every project also has a different sort of program profile. For example, we're also doing a mosque which is under construction in Mumbai, and that becomes a very interesting project for us also. You know, how do we actually look at this sort of this paradigm, and how do we sort of innovate within that lens? We did another interesting project. It was a concept design project for a mosque in Dubai, which is called Nuru, you know, the Mosque of Light. So there could be many other sort of elements through that level of intuitive thinking, you know, and for us, that sort of emotional chord is important when we're looking at social impact, you know, the way we feel for our planet, the way we feel for people, or like, you know, education is one of my favorite sectors. I love doing schools, but I love doing schools because I really understand how important education is, you know, and the sort of long-term investment in education is so critical. But that doesn't mean we're going to step very behind and not look at it through an innovative lens. We still want to push this whole idea of out of the box thinking or out of the classroom thinking, so on, for example. So education, energy, water, sanitation, housing, all become very critical aspects. But yes, it's always sweet when someone actually uses it the way you thought about it. So that's just icing on the cake.
Yeah, nice. I'm just through another question in here. What does learning working at Nudes look like, and how can an aspiring architect get there?
It's quite amazing because honestly, we get about 300 hits every month. Not more than that. We get so many sort of inquiries, and sometimes to see through all the emails takes weeks. But it's also that moment in time, So, for example, if you're working on a competition and there's an intern who wants to come in for like 6 months or 8 months, it really depends if the portfolio is aligned with what's happening at that current spot. And I firmly believe that we work with the strengths of our portfolio. We work in that direction, not against the grain, so to speak. So I think if someone's great in model making, that's something they can contribute towards. Someone's great in research, they can do that. Someone's great in communication, they can work on that. Someone's great with softwares, they can do that.
True. Awesome. So before going to my last question, just wanted to mention again, our upcoming studio workshop with Nuru Karim starts from the end of the month. Just a couple of seats are left to fill up the class. So if you're interested, just go to our profile and click on the link in our bio, and you will read more information about the upcoming studio. So Nuru, with all these experiences in education, in practice, with dealing with multiple projects, competitions, what kind of advice would you like to share with young professionals?
I've said this before, and I truly believe just follow your heart. Unfortunately, we're living in such a materialistic world that all I can say is follow your passion, and you will see the monetary benefit follow, right? Don't do it the other way around. Be patient, do what you're good at, follow your dreams, follow your passion, and everything else will follow around you. The universe will come around and put things at your feet if you do it honestly and you do it with a lot of dedication. And I think that's all. In fact, even in the studio, that's all we're looking for, is just dedication, honesty, and hard work. We're not looking for geniuses with software tools or the A-lister, so to speak. We're just looking for someone who's willing to learn. That's it. And you just have to have that sort of passion for learning till your last breath, So that becomes very critical. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for this amazing discussion and inspiring us all. It was such a nice talking to you, and we look forward to having you in the upcoming episodes as well. Thank you. Do you have any final words to add?
No, that's it. Thank you, Hamid. Thank you, Hamid, for this wonderful discussion, and I hope your viewers had a great time listening to the conversation. And if they have any questions, we're more than happy to answer. They know where to find us, so we look forward to being connected.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Bye.